Hello and welcome to another video. Today we will create some procedural pencils with Blender and Geometrynodes. We will generate a basic geometry with Geometrynodes. We will generate masks with Geometrynodes to blend between different materials. Okay, so let's start. First I'm creating a simple cylinder. I'm setting the vertices to 6. And I'm adding inputs for the radius and the depth. I will raise the amount of fill segments, because we will use this for the tip. Then I'm going to subdivide the mesh 2 or 3 times to get a nice and detailed base shape. And now it's time to add the tip. For this we will need a mask of the top vertices. And we can generate the mask by using the bounding box of our geometry. And we will compare the Z position value to the Z position value of our maximum value. And if it's the same, then we have our top layer. Then we need a Z position node. And let's connect our mask. Okay, now we need a gradient that goes from the center point to the outside. And I want it to be 1 in the center and 0 on the outside. And for this we can simply calculate the distance of our position vector to a vector of 0, 0, 0. But to do this we will first need to set our Z coordinate of the position vector to 0. We can simply multiply the Z coordinate by 0. Let's connect the distance output of our distance node to the scale vector input. And now we have our extrusion for the tip. It is just inverted. With a map range node we can invert the output of our distance node. And now we have a nice tip for our pencil. Let's add an input parameter for the height of our tip. And now we are having one problem. Since we use the map range node, the input distance cannot go higher than 1. But we can fix this by plugging in the radius input to the maximum input of our map range node. And now we have a nice tip for the pencil that always has the same length independent of the radius. I want to add some more subdivisions to our pencil, and I want to make them dependent on the length or the depth of our pencil. For this I simply connect the depth value to the side segments. Now we add a subdivision surface node in the end of our node tree to give it a nice and smooth shape. And this results in another problem. Our tip of the pencil gets softened too much. In this area here we basically want a nice and sharp edge. And to do this we need to add a support loop there. And we can do this by extruding our mesh. I am adding an extrude node, turning off individual, and I only want to extrude the top face. Currently our support loop doesn't follow the shape of our tip, so for this we need to increase the epsilon value of our compare node. It needs to be a little bit higher than our extrude value. To make it adjustable, I'm adding a small input value to our offset scale of the extrusion. And I'm adding a very, very small amount to this value and use it as an epsilon value. I want to use the same extrusion also for the bottom of our pencil to give it a nice and sharp edge there. And for this I'm simply switching our mask. I'm using the side mask and I'm inverting it. And now we have a little extrusion at the top and the bottom. And with this support loop we now have a nice and sharp edge there. Now it is time to create our basic material. Now we will create a mask for the inner part of our pencil. The mask is based on the object output of the texture coordinate node. We will do a simple gradient that goes from the center of our object to the outside. And again we will ignore the z coordinate and we will simply set this to 0. We need a map range node to sharpen up our gradient. And now we have the basic mask for the color part of our pencil. Right now this mask is independent of the radius of our pencil. To fix this, we simply add a new named attribute to our pencil geometry. And we will use this attribute to drive the maximum value of our map range node. But first I'm adding a divide node and divide it by 2 to lower the distance. I'm subtracting a very low value from the divide output to generate a nice small gradient. And we will use this gradient later to create some like of chipped wood in this area. Let's do some cleanup. And now we will generate a mask for the side of our pencil. For this we will use the side mask of our basic cylinder object. Okay, this doesn't really work. Let's add our mask after we extruded it. And this looks much better. With a map range node we can define the sharpness of our gradient. And we also will add some chipped wood later in this area. Now let's add another attribute to store our pencil color. I will simply call this attribute color and it's of type color. And now we have a color attribute from Geometrynodes in our shader. At the moment there is an issue with our color attribute. It shows in Eevee, but not in cycles. And that's because of the name of our attribute. Color is, I guess it's a reserved attribute. And yeah, we can fix this by simply changing the name from the attribute from color to something else, like, and now it shows up in cycles. I've already prepared some basic materials for wood, the color of the pencil, and the sides of the pencil. And we will use those three materials to shade our pencil. The materials are part of the final file that you can download for free. First we will connect the color attribute to our color and sides node group. The sides node group will be assigned by the sides mask, and the color node group will be assigned by the radial mask from the center. Now it is time to generate the chipped wood effect. For this, my wood material has a mask output. And this mask output is basically the wood structure, and we can use this wood structure to roughen up our mask. Let's add a mix RGB node for this. And we will mix our gradient with our mask. And we will set the mode to color burn. And by adjusting our mask, we get a nice and rough transition. And now we will use our mask to mix between the wood and the color shader. Right now our mask is inverted, but we can fix this by simply using a map range node. With the input minimum and maximum value of our map range node, we can sharpen up the mask. To add some more detail to our transition, we can add some slight displacement to this area. And we will use the output of our color burn as a value to drive the height of our displacement. By default, the displacement in Blender is bump only, and in our case this is totally fine. I don't want the geometry here to be actually displaced. I only want the bump. I'm adding a map range node to fine-tune our displacement, and we really need to turn down the scale of our displacement to get rid of any artifacts. Let's organize our node tree a little bit. And now it is time to generate the same setup for the side mask. With our side mask we currently have a little problem because it is too low. It needs to be it needs to go a little bit higher. And that's because we added our attribute after we extruded our mesh. We can fix this by simply moving the store named attribute node before our extrusion. To combine both displacement maps, we have to invert the output of one of the map range nodes for displacement, so we can simply multiply both displacement maps. And now we can tweak our masks a little bit. Now we will add a little bit of text to our pencil. First we add a string to curves node, and then we will type in some text. We fill our curves with triangles, and then we will add a simple material. I have already prepared a gold material. We have to realize our curve objects because they are instances. Otherwise this will give us problems when we try to move them. Let's add a first set position node to set the scale of our text. I'm using a scale vector for this, and I'm scaling the position based on the radius input of our node group. I made a little mistake here. I connected it to the offset value instead of the position value. But I fixed this later. Now we need to align our text to the side of our pencil. We will use another set position node for this. And we will rotate our position vector. We will combine multiple vector rotate nodes to align our text to our object. Right now the text is in the center of our pencil. We need to move our text based on the radius of our pencil to align it with the surface. To align it with the center line of our pencil, we need to set the text alignment to middle. To align our text with the surface, we need to scale the radius value. In our case, 0.867 is a good scale value. But this only works since we have a 6-sided pencil. In the file that you can download, I created a setup that is independent of the amount of sides of our cylinder. I used a basic trigonometric function to calculate the offset distance. Now we need to align our text with the bottom of our pencil. To do this, we can simply move it down by half of the length of our pencil. Let's add some inputs for the text size and the text string to our Geometrynodes network. As I said before, our text isn't correctly scaled by our radius attribute. So let's fix this here. I'm simply disconnecting our vector output from the offset and I'm connecting it to the position input. And now our text properly scales with the radius of our pencil. And now you know how to create a basic pencil with Geometrynodes and Shadernodes. You can get the final result for free from the video description. It also includes the setup for the eraser and an adjustable side amount for the pencil. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did so, you can leave a like or a comment. See you in the next video. Bye!